Jessica Hong, Assistant Curator at the ICA, coordinated the ICA presentation of this exhibition, and she will be moderating the conversation tonight. After the conversation, we are hosting a reception, so please stay in your seats until the screen is lifted, and then join us on the stage to continue the conversation. We also encourage you to see the exhibition upstairs if you have not already. Our galleries will close at 9 p.m. tonight, and the exhibition closes on Sunday. You will hear more from Jessica and our guests shortly, but first, let me share with you short bios of our guest speakers. Dinga Mccannon is an author, illustrator, painter, and much more. She actively participated in critical moments in the history of art, including as a member of the Weusi Artist Collective in the 1960s and the Where We At Collective, composed of professional women of color in the 1970s who supported each other's creative careers. Several of her artworks and ephemera related to the collectives she worked with are included in We Wanted a Revolution. Sisters Beverly Smith and Barbara Smith co-founded the Combahee River Collective in Boston with Demita Frazier, who is here tonight. Thank you, Demita. The collective's 1977 statement greatly influenced the feminist movement, including coining the term identity politics. Beverly Smith worked in public and community health in the Boston area for decades. She's completed a Master's of Public Health at Yale University, followed by a Master's in Human Development and Psychology at the Harvard University Graduate School of Education. She's been active in the Unitarian Universalist denomination for more than 25 years and is a member of First Parish Watertown. Barbara Smith is an activist, independent scholar, and author who wrote for and edited the first anthologies of Black women's studies. She was co-founder and publisher of Kitchen Table, Women of Color Press, and she has also served 2 terms in state government, taking office in 2006 when she was elected to the Common Council in Albany, New York. All 3 of these women are incredibly accomplished, and these summaries do not do justice to their careers. I hope that the conversation tonight will help you learn more about their lives and projects. If you would like to learn more, we have several books related to the exhibition for sale in the ICA store on the first floor, some of which are signed by our guest speakers. This is just one of many books that we have for sale. We also have catalogs and publications related to the exhibition. And finally, before I turn it over to Jessica and our guests, I want to thank our guest speakers for traveling from across the East Coast and for being open to having this public dialogue. I know you have been going into your archives to send us materials for this presentation, and it has been a great pleasure for my colleagues and myself to learn from and work with you all to prepare for tonight. The ICA is the last stop of this exhibition that was organized by the Brooklyn Museum, and the public response has been phenomenal. I'm thrilled that we are ending the run of the show with this program tonight and with all of you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. It is so nice to see a full house. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Jessica Hong. As Julia mentioned, I'm an assistant curator here at the ICA Boston and coordinated our presentation of We Wanted a Revolution, Black Radical Women, 1965 to 85. I'm really thrilled that you're all here with us tonight for the closing celebration, but I'm also incredibly delighted and honored to be amongst these giants. Dinga, Beverly, and Barbara, it's such a privilege to be here on the stage with you, so thank you so much for coming. And Demita, thank you for coming as well. My first question is about collectivity and collective action. And this is a question really for everyone, because Dinga, I know that being part of Where We At, and Weusi, both featured in the exhibition, and Beverly and Barbara as some of the founding members of Combahee River Collective. We'd love to hear from each of you the genesis of these collectives and why the collective form. Dinga, if you'd like to start.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start with Weusi, since that preceded Where We At. Weusi started in the projects of Harlem on 129th Street. It was first known as 20th Century Art Creators. That was probably around 1965. It was a group of Black artists who decided that we didn't have galleries and other formats for our art form, so we took it to the streets. We hung up our artwork on the fences of the project. I think we did that show for maybe 2 or 3 years. The group split up and became, after a very big fight, became Weusi Artist Collective. I was one of the members, and when we were on the fence, there were lots of women out there, but once we became Weusi, it was maybe 1 or 2 others, including myself. The whole African, Back to Africa movement came into play. And unfortunately, it was kind of decided that we as women should walk behind our men. And I had a major problem with that. So I kind of split from the group. However, in all fairness, I am still one of the only woman member in Weusi to this day. We're still together. So basically what had happened is that as a woman artist, I found it was difficult to exhibit. People didn't take you seriously. They thought that you were just going to paint today and become a housewoman tomorrow, which I had no plans on doing. So, and then once I became a single parent, it even became more important and more, I just saw the dividing line just that much more clearly. I called Kay, she called Faith Ringo. We got together and we said, well, why don't we just have a meeting of women artists? And we started calling around and people would tell us, well, there aren't any black women artists. And I said, well, what are you talking about? I'm one, Kay's one. So to make a long story short, about 10, maybe 15 women came to that first meeting, which was in my studio, which was on the Lower East Side. They walked up 5 flights of old tenement. There were no lights. There was water dripping, but they still came up and we had our first meeting, and the rest is history.
There's actually a work by Dinga on view here. And Beverly and Barbara, I mean, same question for you, but if you can also talk about the conception of the now canonical Combahee statement or manifesto, as I should say.
I didn't understand. There was a word.
Well, the same question about kind of the genesis of the Combahee River Collective and then the statement that came about.
Go ahead. Well, one thing I wanted to say in response to what you said, you were talking about how at a lot of different points, people would say like, oh, well, there are not any black women artists, or even if there are, they're going to do, what, a painting or two, or drawing.
Disappear.
And then they're going to disappear and become, devote themselves to housewifery. And I think one thing about the collective forum that is so important is that it's a forum that provides a type of support and strength to people like ourselves. That is to say, women, black people, people of color, people who don't have money. Mm-hmm. As you said, you all didn't have galleries or anything of the sort, but you had each other, you had a shared vision. And one of the things about the collective forum is that it really prioritizes the voices of every single person who's in it, which makes it really, really different from the kinds of organizational forums we see, for example, the US Congress, the Senate. So that's all I'll say, but I want you to talk about the founding.
So there were many collectives during the period when the Combahee River Collective was formed, because it was an incredibly vital period in US history after all the 60s had happened. And they really transformed political understandings, social and political identities, relationships among different groups that had been marginalized and oppressed. We're still oppressed, but a lot of things changed in the latter part of the 60s in particular, that people who had been on the margins were suddenly in a position to define what we thought was important and also to do political work to make those changes that were so sorely needed. So as I said, the fact that we were a collective, I don't know that we even thought about are we a real collective? You know, like what are the standards and the rules of the collective? Because it was just kind of, just like in our late 19th century and the early 20th century, that black women had black women's clubs, and there was a black women's club movement. And I'm sure they didn't think about why are we calling ourselves a club, because that was just the language. And I'm trying to just get at that it wasn't so unique. We were not a living collective, for one thing. Some of our members did indeed, like Demita, lived in collectives. But it was a way of expressing that we're a group that is democratic, and as Beverly said, where everybody's voice is heard and is valued. It also, of course, is a term that is often used on the left, collective economy, collective forms of social organization, et cetera. So the Combahee River Collective was actually originally a chapter of the National Black Feminist Organization. And not long after we organized as the Boston chapter of the National Black Feminist Organization, we decided that we wanted to be independent, and we named ourselves the Combahee River Collective, which is, I learned just this year how Combahee is actually pronounced. It's not Combahee, it's Combahee. And
No.
yes, it is. As people in South Carolina say it to this day, the Combahee River. But I say, well, we say Combahee because that's how black women in the Northeast thought it was. So anyway, that was where Harriet Tubman planned and led a raid on plantations along the Combahee River that freed over 750 enslaved Africans. And that's why we named ourselves the Combahee River Collective. And you asked about the statement, but we'll get to that later.
Okay, okay. But just kind of linking it to We Want a Revolution, many artists in the exhibition utilize the arts as a vehicle to participate in the fight for civil rights. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this connection. I mean, Beverly, you and I kind of talked about this connection between the arts and civic and social engagement. Dinga, I feel like we can kind of see that in your work and practice. And Beverly and Barbara, you've indicated kind of the significance of the arts while growing up in Cleveland. I mean, and Beverly, you've also organized or were involved with Sister Visions,
Yes.
which was an arts and film festival here in Boston. So would love to kind of hear you elucidate a little bit more about the role of the arts in the broader social and political spheres. Dinga, maybe if you have.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say this. Where we at, we didn't consider ourselves a collective, we considered ourselves a sisterhood. And the difference in that is that we related to each other as sisters. We not only band together to promote the arts and to promote our careers, but we also were instrumental in helping each other survive economically, mentally, etc. The arts are a great healing force. A picture is 1,000 words, and the art helped, I think, visualize the thoughts that we were having about being free, being equal, living just like every other human being. And visual transcends language. You can see pictures and anybody can understand it. Sometimes people may not be able to read your language, but they can understand a visual, and that's the power of art.
Beverly, I'd love to hear kind of your experiences with Sister Visions and
Yes.
your thoughts on this.
I just wanted to say something, though, that a thought that I had, because ever since we talked about it, I've been thinking, well, why art? Why was art so important in the context of something that was really focused as a political organization and part of a political movement? And this is, hardly original, but it occurred to me, I thought, well, there's something about art that I think shares the same impulse as political work, political activity, the purpose of which is to change the society, because the thing about art is that there's well, not always, but even in art that is very much in a set or a settled tradition, when the individual artists or the group of artists, in fact, come to create something new, even within a settled tradition, a classical tradition, or whatever you call it, there is, a stepping out into the unknown. And I feel like there's something very parallel in terms of that when you're trying to change a society. That's also stepping out into the unknown. And I also feel that to think about Sister Visions, it was like, I knew there were lots of different Black women artists in lots of different areas. We weren't just talking about visual arts. We did 5 film programs. We had a public program that was at the YWCA in near Copley Square in Boston at that time. And then we also did a much smaller showing at a program for women with substance use issues. And they were in a treatment and recovery program that was in Roxbury. And it was a particular program within the larger program, which was called Women, Inc. Women, Inc., I think, was the first drug treatment program, probably in this country, where women could actually come with their children. And that contributed in a very, very significant way to their, for there to be success in recovery. And so the arts that we focused on were visual arts, music, drama, literature that was not drama, in other words, fiction and poetry. And I keep forgetting one of them. I'll think of it, whatever. Dance, sorry. Not a coincidence, not a coincidence.
But do you also want to talk about the books that are in your hands?
Oh,
at the
yes.
moment?
Well, both of these, in a way, have to do with, well, one of them has to do with Black feminist art, but I'll hold up the older one first. This is a book that's called The New Negro, and I don't know how many people have heard of this. I suspect a lot more of you have heard of something called the Harlem Renaissance. And the Harlem Renaissance was really, this was a volume, in a way, that crystallized the notion of Black artists and Black people in general. You didn't have to be an artist to be involved in the Renaissance, but the new Negro meant that there was a new consciousness. And this is a beautiful book. I highly recommend it. This edition is, you can see, is well, it's not new, but it's the second edition. The first edition, and then I think there's been a more recent, maybe third edition that duplicates the first edition. And in the first edition, you have incredible decorative art. This is a good page, you see? And you also, in the original edition, have actual portraits of Black people, not just artists. The first piece in the book, I think, is of a mother holding a baby. And it's wanting to see images and wanting to see people who look like us. So that's one of the reasons art is so important.
Yeah. Well, Dinga, I'd also love you to talk about kind of the activities of your group, or even sisterhood, as you were calling it. It started with an exhibition in the West Village, and I would love for you to just talk about the varying activities and even the responses that you received.
Okay, our first exhibition was held at the Acts of Art Gallery, and how we got there was that I had gotten a show there, and I had gotten a show there because I had went to see the owner, who said no at first, but then 2 of my artist friends went to bat for me, and they said she's really serious, she wants to be an artist. So at this meeting at my studio, our first meeting, I said, well, we should have an exhibition somewhere. Why don't I ask Nigel Jackson, that was the owner's name. And I asked him, and he was open to it, and so we had our first exhibition. After the exhibition, as a group, we were not just concerned with our futures as artists, but our community. And so we decided that one of the things that we could do was to teach. And art, as I said, is a healing tool. It's also an educational tool. So we began to start workshops. We taught in prisons, we taught in schools, we taught in parks, we taught in all type of alternative spaces. And it was to spread the word and to bring a little joy into people's lives who maybe didn't have any joy of that type, because art brings, it just enables you to feel and to look, and to people who wouldn't think that they had talent at all would suddenly say, oh, I can do this, and that's kind of empowering. And we went on, I think the history of the group shows that this is one of the things we did. We wanted to have careers as artists, but we also wanted to make our lives mean something to our community, to benefit it and to move it forward positively.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of the comments, you know, you touch upon, and amongst many things, issues of access. Dinga, particularly in the works in the exhibition, especially Revolutionary Sister, which I think is looping. But I've read that you talk about it as not seeing any female heroes to look to, and so you created your own female warrior. And the work of Combahee, and also Beverly, your work in healthcare. I'd love to kind of elaborate on that a little bit as well. So, I mean, Dinga and Beverly, Beverly especially with your activities addressing issues of women's health and also the racism rampant within the healthcare system, which arguably still persists. And this lack of access and lack of visibility for women of color affects one's health and well-being. You know, thinking about this self-care workshop that happened right before this talk, interestingly, this term self-care is very much kind of used in everyday lexicon in today's society. So we'd really love to hear your thoughts on this kind of ideas of self-care and access and how you were contending with these issues in your previous work. This is an open question for all of you. But if anyone has...
Well, one of the things that I say that because, because self-care is a popular term nowadays, and some younger people say to me, well, you know, self-care is just so important, like they're telling me something I didn't know. and like what I always say to them, because well, you know how that goes, because when I was young too, and I thought I knew far more than those who were not.
And had discovered things, too,
yes,
that no one
right.
ever. But
Audre Lorde actually once said, who was a dear friend, she said that there's really nothing new. And I don't know if I agreed with her at the time, and I'm not sure I agree with her now, but the thing is she was making that point that there is, you know, some kind of cycle to our efforts to be human on the planet. But anyway, what I think, if I don't say it, is like, do you think that I would be able to do the work that I do at this age if I hadn't given any thought to self-care? Hello, you know, so we may not have called it that, but this dear person here, Demita Frazier, she was an absolute beacon as far as introducing me and many others to things that are now taken for granted, like being a active and delicious vegetarian, and now vegan, of course. And gluten-free. Now I'm talking about where they took it, Demita. I'm talking about where they took it to. But the thing is that way before, you know, that there were Whole Foods and Trader Jack's and all that. No, I'm serious. I mean, really serious. Demita was, you know, talking about how like white sugars and flour are death, you know, white death. She was so involved in learning about what was going to keep us in a great and good relationship to life on the planet. And alternative healing. I go to a chiropractor on a regular basis. Who advised me to see a chiropractor? It was Demita. So, and that's like 40 plus years ago. So as I said, we had some sense of that. It was not possible to be a part of the second wave of the women's movement and not have also a real interest in women's health and how women's health was very political, as it is today, and how we have to intervene on our own behalf and on behalf of our sisters so that we do have bodily integrity and autonomy over our health and our bodily decisions. Sure.
Please.
The thing that's really interesting about what you were doing, and I think it's important that we for artists, activists, academics, to recognize the importance of making connections to other people who are doing similar work, building coalition, connecting with people where you can. And so much of what we were dealing with in terms of health and safety, health and healthcare, came directly out of our experiences working with the rights movement. And many of the things that there were many people who were involved in helping to recognize the need for agency over our bodies without a problem. So we were involved in that time period with organizations that were doing that work, which naturally led to us also how to preserve our bodies and stuff. And it was important. And it wasn't commodified in quite the same way that it is now. It was much more homemade. And to go back to something that you said, art figured into our work because representation and seizing that narrative, taking control over that aspect of our being was critical. And I have to just say a shout out to Chicago, my hometown. Yeah. Who said that? Right here. Oh, right. The thing that you should know is that the movement in terms of political art was also rooted in Chicago. Poster art, we would make posters overnight and light the entire city with lithography. We were teaching young people how to screen print so that they could then get people to demonstrations in a minute, because there was nothing to do in it. So communicating in other forms. And that was in the Black community on the south side of Chicago. So nothing is more populous, say right. Nothing is truly new under the sun. We are standing on the shoulders of so many people who have been trotting this ground before us. And we said we're looking at the inheritors and feel humbled to be carried forward.
Thank you, Demita. Actually, go ahead.
There is one thing I wanted to say because, Demita, you mentioned how a lot of our focus, although not our only focus in terms of women's health, was reproductive health. And I don't know whether you remember this, but I have never forgotten it. One of the issues we were involved in was, not surprisingly enough, reproductive rights. And specifically during that time, we organized around something called the right to abortion. And the reason I say that in that tone as clearly as I can is that a lot of you may not ever have heard people talk about abortion explicitly. What you may have heard more likely is, I'm pro-choice. And I'm like, but what choice are you talking about? You know, could you specify that? So one of the things it shows is how the political continuum in this country has moved to the right. But once Jamila and Barbara and I, maybe who else, I don't know, was in a meeting, and there was a demonstration coming up for to support, the right to abortion. And I remember we wanted to make a button, and Demita said, "What is that thing? Isn't there this thing that says I can't quite remember it, but something about the right to abortion? It can be a woman's right to life." And I said, Demita, someone said, Demita, you just made that up. There is no button that says that. But that became our button, and I have always loved that. I love that moment and how Demita came to it and thought that she had heard it perhaps somewhere else. But also, the thing I like about that slogan, that saying, is that it pinpoints and focuses on something that is virtually never talked about when people are talking about reproductive rights, that there are ways in which reproducing, having a child or children when you are not ready to do it, where your circumstances are not right, can affect the life, the whole life, the holistically conceived life of women. And that's hardly ever talked about.
Well, I also, a part of this talk is also to kind of open it up to the audience as well. So we're also ready to take a few questions from the audience if anyone does have any questions.
You might want to stand up and talk to.
Because you don't see it, but behind you, when you look, it's the banner. We can't live another black women can't live another lives. Which one woman was killed every weekend for 13 weeks in Boston in the summer of 1979. One black woman, yeah. One black woman was killed every weekend. And that is the work that we did together that throughout all the coalitions and the leadership of black women. And that black women can't live without their lives. That was the whole phrase was because it really challenged the whole concept, not just of the murders, but of the violence against black women, black people, but black women. And some was horrible and so much.
Thank you so much, Susan. I just want to say, not to be like a nitpicker, that banner, when you see it come up on the screen again, it says Third World Women. And that's a really important point, because when I was in the exhibit earlier this afternoon, I saw the phrase Third World Women probably in more than one place. And I was thinking, I really want to make sure that we talk about the concept of being third world women. So obviously it's providential or fated that you said, yeah, exactly, Susan, thank you. But the thing is that we saw ourselves as third world women. Many people who were involved in liberation struggles during that period identified with what was going on in what is now referred to as the global south, usually more than the third world. But we're talking about the majority of people on the globe who are not of European heritage, who have been exploited and colonized, murdered and killed for greed and profit. And as I said, most people who were involved in serious political struggle in the period of the 60s and 70s, and even before, with the Pan-Africanist movement, et cetera, we identified as third world people. We saw our status, our situation, everything that was going on is linked to what was going on in other places that were officially colonized and where imperialism, of course, was happening. And we had the concept of internal colonies that, many, black people saw ourselves as being internally colonized within the United States. And it's important to see the distinction, or the fact that it did say third world women, because we were, Combahee was a black women's collective, but we were in solidarity with all and other people of color. And the term at the time that was used was third world. So that's where that came from.
Ooh, and I got something to say about that too.
This is a genuine article. I noticed that this is up on the screen now. So this is my very own personal copy, first edition. And I thought I had some notes in the article that I have in here, because I'm always editing. Things can always be improved. And I just wanted you to see the original. There was something I wanted to say, though, about that banner, because I think, well, to me, I thought it was always important and interesting. You should tell them where that phrase came from.
It's a quote from Barbara Deming, an incredible lesbian feminist, peace and civil rights activist, and an anti-racist activist. As I said, she came out as a lesbian in the 1970s. I had met her when I was in college, when she was about probably 20 years older than I, perhaps. And I met her during my college years because of her involvement in opposing the war in Vietnam, and also being very involved in the civil rights struggle. One of her books is titled, "We Cannot Live Without Our Lives." So that was not original, but we lifted it and then changed it to third world women.
Dinga, you also
Yeah,
wanted to say something.
I have
about
something to say. Where we at, we had a problem with third world because in the span of history, people of color were here first.
That's
now,
correct.
how did we get to be third? So, I know that it's, you know, I saw some kind of technical definition of that, but where we at specifically said, well, how did we get to be third? Why are we in the back again? We were first.
Right, right.
And people know that now.
Yeah,
and they're
they do
saying
now,
it's
but
true.
back then they thought we were a little crazy.
And some people shifted to saying first world.
Yeah,
Like
it's
we
true.
stopped
Like we
saying
did.
third and we started saying first. And as people of color, we are part of the world's global majority. Never use the word minority.
That's true.
I am
Thank
not
you.
a part, as I try to
anybody's
explain to
minority.
people, I'm not a part of any minority groups,
Yeah.
as in none.
There you go.
And the reason I say that, because it's true on a racial, ethnic level, but also, as I said, nobody knows how many lesbians there are. So,
Thank you.
so I just don't accept it. And
And you shouldn't.
women, you know, it's documented that women are always more than one half of every human population.
That's right.
So,
Yes.
fine.
And one thing I want to say, when that slide comes around again of the banner, third world women, we cannot live without our lives, look who's holding the banner. It's not just African American women as we know them, and look who's behind, right behind the banner. You will see a lot of different kinds of folks there. And you will see an Afro-Asian woman, you will see more Latinas. One of the things I think was extraordinary about the collective is that because we existed, we made, we coalesced, we connected with, many different kinds of people, and we held the larger women's movement both here in the Boston area and in the country. We held them to account because we were there. We were reading the same periodicals. We were going to the same meetings. So let me assure you, we went to the same meetings. And I just think we had, and I wish I could document it in some ways, but we had a particular effect on what went on here in Boston. I think what went on here in Boston was a bit different than what went on in terms of what was called the women's movement in different parts of this country.
Yeah, in the front here.
You're going to have to stand up and shout so people can hear you.
I was saying thank you, but I also had a question specifically for Dinga because I've been really infatuated with the outfit that you have on. Art and political statement that you wanted to elaborate on and say the names on there, the photos are political prisoners or people who lost their lives in the system, things like that.
None of the above. This coat, when this exhibition first started, I thought it was fantastic. The only thing that I did not like was that many of the Where We At members who gave their lives and time to bring us to this point were not here anymore. Also, and there's very few of us left. We just lost 2 people. So I decided I didn't just want to come to represent Where We At because we were a sisterhood. So I made this coat. On this coat is everybody's name who was in the group over the 25 years that we were together. On the back of the coat, there are some moments in Where We At history that were important and that I happen to have flyers and stuff, so I reproduced them. That way, when I come to events like this, it's not just me, it's the whole group. That's it.
I still have a couple of hands.
To get to
Sorry.
the back, too.
Okay, I'll move to this side. I'll move to this side afterward. Oh, Alex, you're okay. Sorry, I saw you in the beige coat first.
I just want to say, looking at this, thank you. I was 12 years old when that happened, and my babysitter
Thank you, thank you.
All right, I saw Alexandria.
So, hi, I have a question about what you can speak to what it means to sing as a collective for the long people did. I'm a co-owner of the core of Network Black Mars and Black Lives. So, curious to know what you think is key to being a large group of women putting themselves together and making, creating, and seeing change for that.
Okay, the first thing you need is a core group of women who really want to do what it is you want to do. Because throughout the 25 years, women came, women left, women came, women left. But there was that core group of us who had the same vision. And it's like being in a family. People are going to fight, they're going to throw down and everything. But at the end of the day, you come together because you have to and because you have a vision that you want to see. And you realize that in order to see that, you're going to have to stick together. There's always going to be fights, there's always going to be arguments, there's going to be the pulling and the tugging, and it's hard. It's really, really hard to keep any group of human beings together. Right. But that singular vision was the goal. And so those of us who particularly were the core, we kind of reined in everybody else to make sure that no matter what else happened, we kept going forward. So, good luck.
Okay.
Good luck.
You in the middle, yeah, with the glass. Yeah.
Thanks so much. I'm just curious whether religion and spirituality play a role in work with at all, and how spirituality
Yeah, well, I guess you're talking to me. But first of all, being an artist is a leap of faith. You gotta have faith, and we had a really close relationship with the Creator, no matter who or what you called him or her. And it's just like the backgrounds that most of us came from, we all went to church. A lot of us were Baptist, some of us were Catholic, but we still had this, it's sort of intangible, but very much present. And that's really what kind of kept us together. The belief that there is a Creator out there. He, she is omnipresent. If you do the right thing, most of the time, it will come back to you. And because sometimes it don't. But we were really very, very, very spiritual people. We had Muslims, we had Catholics, we had Baptists, we had people who just believed that there is a God and we should do the right thing, or at least try to. So it was very much a part of our history.
And I think that religion and spirituality has a particular role in the lives of people who are oppressed. Now, I'm not the first person to think of that because, Karl Marx, for example, wrote about, how religion is the opiate of the people. And the thing is, I'm not saying I disagree with that, because I can see it. I have seen it. I've lived it. Nevertheless, I wanted to say that it's hard to really overemphasize the importance of, just speaking as a black person and raised Baptist, it's hard to overemphasize the importance of the black church in so many different ways. And it's not only that ineffable experience of spirituality and faith and believing in the things not seen. It's also the fact that black churches were engines of politics. They were engines of organization. And what I mean by that is it was a place that one could go in the godforsaken 1920s, 30s, 40s, 1890s, during slavery, where black people had a chance of being treated like decently as human beings, and where we could get our act together. The church we grew up in, we were from Cleveland. The church that we went to, they started a credit union. It started right after World War II, and I can't remember how small the first contributions were. It was I think it was primarily, or most especially, an initiative of veterans who would come back from World War II. And it was like, $11, $12, I mean, 20, I don't know. It was a tiny amount of money. And we had a very large church, so that helped. Our credit union became the largest credit union in the state of Ohio. It was amazing, and that was very, very important in people keeping, body and soul together. How do you organize a meeting? Well, we were always having meetings of some kind or another, some kind of another. So I just wanted to bring that out because you mentioned spirituality. It has a lot of different aspects to it.
I think that we have time for one more question,
And
and
we
then
have 2 or 3.
and then we'll have a reception afterwards, so we can continue the conversation on stage. I'm going to try to go with the red in the back.
My question is for all three of you in terms of the importance and the impact of kitchen table press and the publications like Home World and Where It's Called My Back, as well in terms of Dinga Mccannon, the books that you illustrate. And so I'm wondering if y'all can talk about the impact of these publications and the importance.
Well, Kitchen Table Women of Color Press was the first U.S. publisher that had run by women of color that had a national reach and even an international reach. And I was one of the co-founders of Kitchen Table, and I was the publisher. That was a 15-year commitment. And excuse me, Audre Lorde and I were talking right before she came to do a black women's poetry reading here in Boston. I lived in Boston at that time. So this was like probably fall of 1980, because it was the fall, because it was going to be a Halloween poetry reading. And Hattie Gossett came, and Myrna Bain came, and Audrey and I, who had been friends for a few years by that time, she said, Barbara, we really need to do something about publishing. I lived in Roxbury, right on the Jamaica Plain border. So I said, okay. She didn't have to explain to me why we needed to do something about publishing, because I was already published and having my adventures with white women's organizations, just like on the artist side, having my adventures with the white women's publications, presses, etc. So Kitchen Table actually started right here in Roxbury, as far as when the first meeting was. Excuse me. I moved to New York in the summer of '81, and we did the best we could with the little that we had. For many years, the press was in Albany, New York, where I still live. And it was about making it up from scratch. What can I say? We sold tens of thousands of books. And we did it without any internet. I remember how excited we were when we got a fax machine. I mean, but as I have tried to explain to people, you do not miss a technology that doesn't exist. So nobody's sitting around in the 19th century saying, I wish I had a car, you know, because there were no cars. And we were not saying, oh my goodness, it'd be so much easier if there was an internet, because there wasn't an internet. So we did what we could with what we had. We had the state-of-the-art technology that was available at the time. And just to make that connection between art and literature and the rest of it, that is visual art, my favorite part of being a publisher was working with graphic artists and making sure that our books were as beautiful as they could possibly be. I would tell my coworkers, who were generally younger than I would say it costs just as much money to create and to publish an ugly book as it does to create and publish a pretty book. I said, we are only going to do pretty books. And the looks of our books, Beverly made the point about, let me hold this one. Beverly made the point about the new Negro. I patterned, you've seen the cover of Homegirls, the original cover, which is an African design, textile design. I patterned Homegirls after the new Negro, consciously. I Xerox pages from the new Negro and sent it to a press, again, here in Boston, Persephone Press. Some of you remember Persephone. And I sent it to them. I said, I want my book to look like the new Negro. This is what the new Negro looks like. I want Homegirls to have that kind of a feel, which was a very African feel. They're African design elements within the book, and as I said, that was the cover as well. So there was a lot of synergy between our different art forms, our different disciplines. We were talking about art a few minutes ago, and all I could think of was that phrase that people love nowadays, is for the culture, for the culture. And if you're African heritage, no matter where you are, you're about art, because we generally manifest our art, if in no other way, through our living. So, you know, it's not like art's on the wall over here in these particular buildings. It's like we come out of our homes and out of the womb and wherever else. We come out that way, we make it up, and we live it, and it's really very powerful. I'm so honored to be on this panel with Dinga, whose work I've known for many years, and I just think these things are not divided from each other.
And when I had my daughter and she went to school, and I found out that they were still reading the same old Dick and Jane that I had when I was in school. And it was an issue with that because there were no people of any color in the books that our children read, all European white. So my son's father, who was a playwright, he had a connection with Lothrop Lee and Shepard. We decided that we wanted a little more for our children, so we combined. He wrote the story, I did the illustrations. We took him to his publisher, who told us, well, black people don't read. I'm serious, that's what we were told. So I think out of guilt, they published one book. And then we got like 5 or 6 books, about 5 or 6 books out of them. What they would do, they would publish the book, and they were too lazy or they didn't have the confidence in our community to find the proper marketing channels to sell the books. So what would happen is I would get a book published. I would be on the road from New York to California and back selling those books. I couldn't keep enough of them. They couldn't sell them. So most of my books languished, and they ended up in the warehouse, and I bought as many as I could, etc. But after that, somebody wised up and said, oh, there is some money in this. And then we began to have more books with diversity, because a child needs to see him or herself reflected in something that they're getting in school every day, or else that whole thing about self-image, self-love, that all starts in school. So wonderful.
Absolutely.
I have a
Yeah.
question. How many of you all have been to the Grand Canyon? Oh, a lot of people. So Barbara and I went. How many of you have been to the post office at the Grand Canyon? Now, the reason I asked that, and I was thinking of this when you were talking about kitchen table, women of color press, when Barbara and I went to the Grand Canyon, one of our stops was to go to the post office at the Grand Canyon. I'm sure there's more than one given how big the Grand Canyon is, but the thing is, open the trunk of Barbara's little car, take out the boxes of books, whatever it was that was being, that had to be sent out for kitchen table press, and we went to the post office at the Grand Canyon to mail kitchen table women of color books. And when Barbara says that she was a publisher, for a lot of the time that the press existed, she was the publisher, the editor, the writer. She did everything except for the for the art of the books.
Art directed.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I art directed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to, bring that up because it was incredibly labor intensive. But I love the fact that we went to the.
I must have blocked something. I didn't remember that until now.
You blocked it. I never will forget it. It was pretty cold there too, because the climate and everything. It was like March.
Yeah, and it was snowing big time. Whoa.
It was very cold.
Well, we're a little bit over, so we're going to open this up for a reception. So please join us on stage, and we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much.